The recycled air in my apartment tasted like yesterday's regrets and a hint of ozone purifier malfunction. It was the signature flavor of Mars 5 orbital station, a sprawling tin can where ambition went to die and get replaced by a steady paycheck and a guaranteed ration of nutrient paste that tasted suspiciously like chicken, regardless of the label. I was Owen Hale, age 27, bioengineer by trade, professional nobody by every other metric. My world was a 50-square-meter box with a viewport that offered a stunning, and by now mind-numbingly familiar, vista of the great red pimple of the solar system. In the grand, sprawling tapestry of the 26th century, I was a beige thread. Humanity had, against all odds, clawed its way to the stars and found them already crowded. We were the new kids on the galactic block, the scrappy, loud mammals who had invented faster-than-light travel just a century after we had figured out that hitting rocks together made fire. Now, we were junior members of the Galactic Alliance, a bustling, chaotic democracy of species that ranged from crystalline life forms to silicon-based behemoths who communicated in seismic waves. We were tolerated, mostly. Our adaptability was our strength. Our history of blowing ourselves up was our eternal black mark. And then there were the Nocteri. Even their names sounded like something whispered in a forgotten language. Tall, elegant, and possessing a biology that made them devastatingly effective predators. They were, for all intents and purposes, space vampires. They did not do capes or Gothic castles. Their aesthetic was more lethal couture and warships that moved with the silence of a hunting cat. We had fought a bitter, bloody war with them for 60 years. They saw us as a disorganized but delicious new food source. We saw them as monsters from the deepest, darkest corners of space. Turns out, we were both a little bit right. The war ended not with a bang, but with a treaty. A fragile, 10-year-old peace brokered by the Alliance when both sides were too exhausted to keep fighting. Now, they were our allies, a term everyone used with invisible quotation marks. Old habits and old fears died hard. My only personal brush with the Nocteri aristocracy had been at the Interspecies Academy, a place designed to foster harmony and understanding, but which mostly fostered interspecies cliques and awkward cafeteria encounters. It was there I had first seen Avera Drael. She was not just a Nocteri. She was the Nocteri, daughter of a powerful clan leader. She moved through the Academy's sterile corridors like a queen surveying her domain. She was brilliant, topping every class from xenobiology to advanced particle physics. She was captivating, with eyes the color of a dying nebula and hair as black as the void between them. And to me, Owen Hale, the human scholarship kid who spent most of his time trying to make algae grow faster, she was completely and utterly invisible. I had been in 3 of her classes. I sat 2 rows behind her in galactic history for a full semester. She had never once looked in my direction. Not with interest. Not with pity. Not even with the casual disdain she reserved for the lumbering Grolac exchange students who always smelled faintly of sulfur. It was a perfect, crushing indifference. I was just part of the background radiation of her universe. I used to joke to myself, in the sad, echoing chamber of my own mind, that I was the one man in the galaxy who had been exsanguinated by Avera Drael with a single look, or rather, the absolute lack of one. Her fangs were not required. Her apathy had been enough to drain me dry. That part of my life was a closed book, a dusty digital file stored deep in my personal cloud, labeled Reasons to Stick with Algae. I had been unceremoniously expelled from the academy after a lab accident, an incident she was involved in, though her record remained spotless while mine was permanently stained. I had retreated to the quiet anonymity of corporate bioengineering on Mars 5, where the only thing that could ignore me was the stubborn protein strain I was trying to synthesize. Tonight, was particularly steeped in that bland flavor of solitude. The nutrient paste was hearty beef stew, which meant it was the same chicken flavor, but with a brownish tint. I was scrolling through old news feeds, a pointless exercise in digital archaeology, when her face appeared on a headline from a high society gala on Nixar Prime, the Nocteri homeworld. Ambassador Drayle dazzles at Unity Summit. She looked older, sharper. The effortless grace of her youth now honed into a weapon of diplomatic poise. Her smile was a carefully calibrated instrument of charm, and for a stupid, painful second, I felt that old, familiar phantom sting of being utterly insignificant. I sighed, the sound loud in the quiet of my apartment. Well, good for her, I muttered to the empty room. Hope she's happy, conquering the galaxy one condescending smile at a time. To purge the feeling, I decided to do something truly pathetic. I was going to open that old digital journal from my academy days, a little trip down memory lane to remind myself why my current, boring life was actually a blessing. It was like picking at a scab. I knew it was a bad idea, but the compulsion was overwhelming. My fingers hovered over the console, ready to dive headfirst into a sea of my own adolescent angst. And then the chime rang. It was a simple, two-tone sound, the standard alert for my apartment's entrance. Nobody ever came to my door. My groceries were delivered by drone. My work was done remotely. And my social life was conducted entirely through encrypted messages with my one friend, a hacker named Tessa, who lived 3 systems away. The chime was so alien, so unexpected, that my first thought was that it had to be a system error. It chimed again, more insistent this time. With a groan, I heaved myself off my worn-out synth leather couch. Probably a maintenance bot with the wrong address, or a neighbor trying to sell me tickets to the station's annual zero-gravity talent show. I shuffled to the door, my worn ship slippers scuffing against the metallic floor. "I am not interested in your hydroponic vegetable subscription," I said through the door's speaker, my voice thick with annoyance. There was a pause, then a voice that was smooth as polished obsidian and colder than the vacuum outside, replied, "I assure you, Mr. Hale, I am not selling vegetables." My blood went cold. It was impossible. It was a voice I had only ever heard in lecture halls, a voice I had replayed in my head 1,000 times, with 1,000 different imagined conversations that never happened. My hand, suddenly trembling, moved to the panel. The door hissed open. She stood in the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridor, and the hallway suddenly felt shabby and inadequate. Avra Drayle was not just a memory anymore. She was real, and she was standing at my door. She was dressed in a tailored, deep indigo suit that seemed to absorb the light around it. The cut was severe, militaristic yet undeniably elegant. Her black hair was pulled back into a severe, intricate knot, emphasizing the sharp, aristocratic lines of her face. Her eyes, those same nebula-colored eyes, were fixed on me, and for the first time in my life, they were actually seeing me. There was no recognition, not in the friendly sense, but there was an unnerving intensity, a focus that felt like a physical weight. She was no longer a dazzling student. She was a presence, a force of nature that had just decided to manifest in the mundane ecosystem of my life. The ambassador from the gossip feeds was here, in the flesh, looking like she had just stepped off the cover of Galactic Vogue and onto my welcome mat, which ironically read, "Go away." My brain, a magnificent machine capable of sequencing complex genomes, chose this moment to completely short-circuit. All the witty retorts, the scathing remarks I had spent years mentally composing for this impossible scenario, evaporated. I was 17 again, a gawky human boy staring at a goddess, utterly and completely tongue-tied. She took a small, deliberate step forward, her gaze sweeping over my tiny apartment, taking in the messy couch, the half-eaten bowl of nutrient paste, the flickering console screen. Her expression did not change, but I felt judged, weighed, and found wanting on a cosmic scale. "Oh, inhale," she said. It was not a question. Her voice was even more unnerving up close, a low, resonant alto that vibrated in the air. "I have been looking for you for a very long time." My own voice, when I finally found it, came out as a pathetic squeak. "You have." "Yes." Her eyes locked back onto mine. The full, undivided attention of average rail was a terrifying thing. It felt like being pinned by a searchlight. "I require your assistance with a matter of extreme urgency." I finally managed to reboot my brain, and the first program to load was sarcasm, my oldest and most reliable defense mechanism. "My assistance?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh bubbling up from my chest. "Right. Let me guess. Your shuttle's replicator is broken, and you need someone to whip you up a batch of my famous nutrient paste." "Sorry. I am all out of the chicken-flavored beef stew." A flicker of something annoyance, impatience crossed her face for a microsecond, before her mask of perfect composure settled back into place. "Your humor is as underwhelming as I recall from your file." "You have a file on me." The indignation was like a splash of cold water. "Why in the hell would you have a file on me? I was a ghost to you. I was a footnote in the lab accident report that got me kicked out of the academy while you walked away without a scratch." The words tumbled out. A decade of resentment finally finding a voice. She did not flinch. She just stood there, absorbing it. Her stillness a stark contrast to my sudden, ragged breathing. "The incident at the lab is part of why I am here," she said, her tone softening almost imperceptibly. "Things were more complex than you were led to believe." "Complex," I laughed again, the sound harsh and ugly. "It seemed pretty simple to me. I got expelled. You got a commendation for grace under pressure. I ended up on this floating rust bucket engineering better ways to grow space kelp, and you ended up on the cover of magazines. So, you will have to forgive me if I am not exactly eager to offer my assistance." I made to close the door, my grand moment of defiance, the culmination of years of revenge fantasies. This was it. The moment I finally got to slam the door in her perfect, condescending face. Her hand shot out, not touching the door, but simply raising in a gesture that made me pause. It was a gesture of command, effortless and absolute. "Please," she said, and the word was so unexpected, so completely at odds with the powerful ambassadorial figure before me, that it stopped me cold. I would not be here if there were any other choice. The fate of my entire species may depend on it. I stared at her, my mind reeling. The fate of her species. Was this some kind of elaborate joke? A test? Had I finally gone crazy from nutrient paste fumes? "You are serious," I whispered, the sarcasm finally draining away, replaced by a bewildering sense of vertigo. "Deadly serious," she confirmed, her gaze unwavering. She took another step, crossing the threshold into my apartment. She moved with a liquid grace that made my cluttered living space feel even smaller. Like a panther had just wandered into a hamster cage. The air crackled with her presence, charged with an energy I could not define. She stopped a few feet from me, close enough that I could see the faint, almost invisible tracery of silver veins beneath the pale skin of her temples, a hallmark of noctary physiology. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This was not a dream. This was not a hallucination. Average Rail, the Noctary ambassador, the woman who had haunted my past like a beautiful, indifferent ghost, was in my apartment, and she was asking for my help. I swallowed hard, trying to assemble a coherent thought. What? What could you possibly need from me? A nobody bioengineer on a backwater station. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than power and control in her eyes. I saw desperation. It was a carefully shielded, tightly controlled desperation. But it was there, a deep, dark well of it. Then she spoke the words that would detonate my entire reality. "I need your blood," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, a sound that was both intimate and chilling. "And maybe, if there is time for it after we save my people from extinction, your forgiveness." For a long moment, the universe consisted of nothing but the space between us, charged with the sheer audacity of her request. My blood, my forgiveness. She might as well have asked for my winning lottery ticket and the keys to a non-existent personal yacht. The shock that had frozen my tongue thawed into a slow, simmering heat that started in my gut and worked its way up. I laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It was rusty and full of jagged edges. My blood. Of course. Let me just get my little donor kit. Do you have a preference for the withdrawal method syringe? Or are we going full classic vampire, and you just sink your teeth into my neck right here in the hallway? Might want to put down some newspapers first. It could get messy. She did not rise to the bait. Her expression remained one of glacial calm, though I could see a muscle twitching in her jaw. "This is not a matter for levity. Owen, I am talking about a plague, a tailored bioweapon we are calling the Lux phage, the light virus. It targets a specific sequence in the Nocteri genome, responsible for our ultraviolet light absorption and cellular regeneration. It turns our own biology against us. In simple terms, it causes us to dissolve from the inside out when exposed to even minimal ambient light." The clinical description sent a chill through me despite my anger. It sounded horrifying. It also sounded like it had absolutely nothing to do with me. A light virus. Sounds nasty. "So what do you want from me?" "A 5-credit donation to the Save the Vampires Fund. I am a bit short this month." "We do not need your money," she said, her voice sharp with an urgency that finally cut through my sarcasm. "We need your genes. Our best scientists, the ones who are not already dying, have discovered a potential cure. A unique human protein that can bind to the phage and render it inert. But it is not just any human protein. It has to be primed, altered by exposure to a very specific enzymatic catalyst." A cold dread began to seep into the edges of my consciousness. I knew where she was going, but my mind refused to make the final leap. "A catalyst," I repeated, my voice flat. "Yes," she confirmed, her dark eyes boring into me. "A catalyst that was the primary agent in a research project you were briefly assigned to at the Academy. A project that was terminated after a containment breach." She paused, letting the words hang in the air, heavy and damning. "The lab accident, Owen, the one that got you expelled. You were the only human who had direct, unshielded biological exposure to the source compound." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. The past, which I had carefully buried under years of routine and resentment, came roaring back to life. The explosion, the alarms, the shimmering, silver liquid that had sprayed across my station. My hands, my face, the chaos, the investigation, and her, standing on the other side of the quarantine glass, her face a perfect mask of detached concern, while my life was being dismantled by Academy officials. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "No, that is not possible. It was an accident. A coolant line ruptured." "That was the official story," she said, her voice low and conspiratorial. A story I was instructed to corroborate. It was easier than explaining that a restricted, experimental Nocteri gene therapy agent had just aerosolized itself all over a promising but ultimately disposable human student. Disposable. The word hit me like a physical blow. All the bitterness, all the rage I had suppressed for 10 years, boiled over. Disposable. That accident destroyed my reputation. It blacklisted me from every decent research institute in the human sphere. I lost my scholarship, my future, everything. And you stood there and said nothing. You let them throw me away like a piece of broken lab equipment. And now, after a decade, you show up at my door and tell me that the worst day of my life is suddenly the key to your salvation. The sheer, astronomical arrogance is breathtaking. I did what I had to do to survive, she snapped, a flash of genuine fire in her eyes. The first real emotion I had seen from her. Do you think I had a choice? I was a junior diplomat's daughter, not an empress. My father's position was tenuous. If I had contradicted the official report, we would have both disappeared into a very deep, very quiet hole. I was 17. Owen, just like you. The difference is, I paid the price and you did not. I shot back, taking a step forward, my fists clenched. So if you think I am going to just roll up my sleeve and bleed for the girl who watched my life go down the drain, you are even crazier than I thought. Get out of my apartment. I cannot do that. That was not a request. Suddenly, the dim lights of the corridor outside my viewport were washed out by flashing strobes of red and blue. A low, thumping sound began to vibrate through the floor, the unmistakable rhythm of mag boots marching in formation. My blood ran cold for a completely different reason. A voice, amplified and devoid of any human warmth, echoed from outside. Occupant Owen Hale. This is Alliance Security. By order of the Intergalactic Bioethics Council, you are to open this door and surrender yourself for quarantine and examination. You have 20 seconds to comply. My head whipped around to face Avera. Her face was pale, her composure finally cracking. Bioethics Council. Quarantine. What the hell is going on? They know. She breathed, her eyes wide with something that looked like fear. Someone from my government must have leaked my mission. They know about your exposure. They will not see you as a cure. Owen. They will see you as a contamination. A loose end from a buried project that needs to be tied off. They will take you apart, piece by piece, in a lab to find out what you are, and when they are done, they will sterilize what is left. The 20-second countdown had begun, each number a hammer blow against my already fractured reality. 10 years of quiet, boring solitude. And now, I was trapped between a space vampire who wanted my blood and a security team that wanted to dissect me. My life had a sudden, unwelcome flair for the dramatic. I am not going with you, I said, backing away from her, my eyes darting between her and the reinforced door. You do not have a choice, she said, her voice filled with a grim finality. There is no more time for debate. There is no time to convince you. I am sorry for this. She moved. She was impossibly fast, a blur of dark indigo. One moment she was by the door. The next, she was in front of me. I threw my hands up to defend myself, a pathetic, reflexive gesture. Her hand, slender, but steel strong, clamped around my wrist. Her other hand came up to cradle the back of my head, her touch surprisingly gentle. I truly am sorry. Owen, she whispered, her face inches from mine. Her eyes were filled with a strange mix of regret and fierce determination. And then she leaned in, her head tilting to the side. I felt a brief, stinging pressure against the side of my neck. It was not the savage, tearing bite of a monster from a horror film. It was precise, clinical, and shockingly intimate. A sharp, piercing pain, like two sterile needles sliding into my flesh. My body convulsed. I tried to push her away, but her grip was unbreakable. A wave of dizziness washed over me, and the world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. The sounds of the security team preparing to breach the door faded into a dull roar. My mind fractured. Images, feelings, sensations that were not my own flooded my consciousness. I was in a place that was cold, sterile, and smelled of antiseptic, white walls, gleaming chrome, a man's face, lean and severe, with eyes that held no warmth. He was speaking, but the words were distorted, like they were coming from underwater. The human subject's genetic markers show a remarkable receptivity, a perfect baseline. I felt a chill spread through my own veins, a phantom memory of an injection. The fluid was cold, electric. Then a flash of Avra's face, younger, her expression terrified, watching from behind a pane of reinforced glass. She was not indifferent. She was horrified. Another flash, a star chart, but not one I recognized. A code name, glowing in stark red letters on a screen, Project Eclipse. The name echoed in the sudden, silent space of my mind, filled with a significance I could not grasp, but felt in my very bones. The world rushed back in a dizzying surge. Avra was pulling away, her lips stained with a small trickle of my blood. Her eyes were wide, glowing with a faint inner luminescence. The security team was finally cutting through the door. I could hear the high-pitched whine of a plasma torch. What was that?" I stammered, my legs unsteady, my hand flying to my neck. My fingers came away wet and red. "I woke it up," she said, her voice breathless. She was already pulling me away from the door, towards the back wall of my small apartment. "The memories, the data that was encoded into your blood during the project, it is all there. You just could not access it." She slapped a panel on the wall, one that had always just looked like a circuit breaker access point. With a hiss of hydraulics, the entire section of the wall slid away, revealing a dark, narrow service tunnel. The station's guts. "My nutrient paste is getting cold back there," I mumbled, my brain still trying to process the psychic data dump I had just received. The breach alarm on my door screamed. Avera yanked me into the tunnel. "We do not have time for your paste." "You bit me! Alliance Security is trying to vaporize my front door," I yelled, stumbling after her as she broke into a run. The tunnel was dark, lit only by occasional maintenance strips. "Did you just kidnap me, or did you just kiss me?" "Both, statistically speaking," she shot back without breaking stride. The act involved non-consensual relocation and a forcible transfer of biological material in close proximity. "Now, run faster." We sprinted through the labyrinthine corridors of the station's maintenance network, the shouts of the security team echoing behind us. My lungs burned, and my mind was a chaotic storm of my own memories and the alien fragments she had unlocked. Project Eclipse. My blood. The accident that was not an accident. My entire life, the bedrock of my identity, had been a lie. Avera led me with an unnerving confidence, taking turns that seemed random but were clearly premeditated. She finally came to a stop at a heavy airlock marked Waste Expulsion, Port J13. My stomach churned. "You are not serious," I panted, leaning against the cold metal wall. "There is a maintenance skiff docked on the outer hull," she said, her fingers flying across the airlock's control panel. "A private vessel, untraceable." "You have a getaway car parked outside the garbage chute?" I asked incredulously. "You planned all of this?" "I planned for contingencies," she corrected, as the outer door began to cycle open, revealing the terrifying, silent expanse of space and a small, sleek, black ship clinging to the station's hull like a parasite. "I did not plan on you being so stubborn." We scrambled through the docking tube and into the ship. It was as Spartan and elegant as she was, all dark metals and cool, glowing consoles. Avra threw herself into the pilot's seat, her hands moving with a practiced efficiency. The ship undocked with a gentle lurch. Through the forward viewport, I saw Mars 5 dwindling behind us, its lights a lonely constellation in the black. My home. The prison I had built for myself. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, hard anger. I stalked over to her seat, my boots clanking on the deck. "All right, we are off the station. You have got me. You have got my blood. Now you are going to tell me everything. What is Project Eclipse? And why was I a part of it without even knowing? She finished inputting a course, and the ship's engines hummed to life, pushing us away from Mars and into the deeper dark. Only then did she turn to face me. The desperation was gone, replaced by a weary resolve. Her face was etched with a profound exhaustion. Project Eclipse was a clandestine joint research initiative between a radical faction of Noctari scientists and a human Black Ops bioweapons division, she said, her voice low. It was officially shut down decades ago. Its goal was to study the potential for synergistic hybridization of our two species, to create something new, something stronger. I stared at her, horrified. Hybridization. You mean they were trying to make human-vampire hybrids? In a sense. They were not successful. The project was deemed a failure, a violation of every bioethics law in the Alliance Charter. All records were supposedly destroyed. All test subjects were terminated. She looked at me, her expression grim. They were looking for a specific human genetic makeup that would not reject the Noctari retrovirus used in the experiments. A baseline. They found it in a brilliant, unsuspecting orphan who had just won a scholarship to the Interspecies Academy. The implication hit me with the force of a physical impact. Me, I whispered. I was the test subject. You were the control group, she corrected gently. The baseline. The accident in the lab was not an accident. It was a deliberate exposure, to see how your system would react to the catalyst in its raw form. I did not know until it was too late. My father was involved with the faction. He forced me to participate, to observe, to stay silent. I sank into the co-pilot's chair. My legs no longer able to support me. My entire life, my entire identity, was a fabrication. I was not Owen Hale, the unlucky student. I was Owen Hale, the lab rat. And she had been one of the scientists in the white coats, watching me through the glass. My anger, my hatred, my 10 years of resentment, it all felt so small now, so pointless in the face of this monstrous revelation. But one feeling rose above the confusion and the horror of burning, all-consuming curiosity. I had to know. I had to understand what they had done to me. I looked at her, the woman who was my tormentor and my only source of answers. The fury was still there, a cold, hard knot in my stomach. But it was no longer about simple revenge. It was about reclamation. Fine, I said, my voice quiet but steady. I will help you. I will let you study my blood, find your cure. But this is not for you, and it is not for your people. This is for me. You owe me a debt, Avra, a life's worth of truth, and I am going to collect every last drop of it. The journey to Jupiter was a long, silent scream. Our little ship, the Nocturne, as Avra called it, was a marvel of stealth engineering, but it could not outrun the thoughts rampaging through my head. For 10 years, I had built my identity on a foundation of resentment. I was Owen Hale, the wronged party, the victim of a cold, indifferent system embodied by one perfect, untouchable woman. Now, that foundation was dust. I was not a victim of circumstance. I was a curated experiment. My life had not been derailed. It had been meticulously, secretly guided onto this exact track. Avera sat at the helm, a silhouette against the star-dusted infinity of the viewport. She did not speak, and neither did I. What was there to say? Every polite inquiry, every angry accusation, felt laughably inadequate. We were two ghosts, haunted by a past that was suddenly, terribly present. The only sounds were the quiet hum of the life support and the occasional, almost imperceptible whisper of the ship's recycler, turning my exhaled rage into breathable air. "Where are we going?" I finally asked, my voice rough. The silence had become a physical weight, and I had to push it aside. "To the source," she replied. her gaze fixed on the navigation console, the place where Project Eclipse was born and where it was buried, a decommissioned research station in orbit around Thebe. I dredged up my fragmented knowledge of solar system geography, Thebe, one of Jupiter's inner moons. It is little more than a rock. Precisely, she said. Small, dark, and perpetually bathed in the gas giant's radiation belt. The perfect place to hide something you never want found. The station is officially listed as a derelict survey outpost, stripped and abandoned 60 years ago. In reality, it was the project's primary laboratory. The thought of returning to the scene of the crime, a crime I did not even know I was a victim of, made my stomach clench. And you think the cure for your light virus is just sitting there in a freezer? I think the research that explains the unique properties of your blood is there, she corrected. We need to understand the catalyst they exposed you to. We need the original formula, the unredacted data. Without it, my people are trying to reverse engineer a cure in the dark, and they are running out of time. We fell back into silence. The ship flew on, a tiny spark of purpose in an overwhelming void. I watched her, really watched her, for the first time without the blinding filter of my own bitterness. She was not the untouchable goddess from the academy, nor the imperious ambassador from my doorway. She was a soldier on a desperate mission, her movements precise and economical, her features sharpened by a weariness that went bone deep. I saw the faint tremor in her hands as she adjusted the ship's energy output, the subtle tension in her shoulders. She was not just fighting for her species. She was afraid, and seeing her fear made her, for the first time, seem tragically real. Days bled into one another. We subsisted on nutrient rations from the ship's small galley, a significant upgrade from my station paste, but still a bland testament to survival over pleasure. We spoke only when necessary, exchanging data on the ship's systems, potential Alliance patrol routes, and the station's last known schematics. The space between us remained a carefully preserved vacuum, filled with unspoken accusations and unanswered questions. As we finally entered Jupiter's immense gravity well, the ship began to shudder. The gas giant filled the viewport, a terrifying, beautiful swirl of ochre, cream, and blood-red storms. It was a king, and we were less than insects in its court. Thebe was a misshapen lump of rock, caught in the eternal twilight of its parent's shadow. The radiation is interfering with the long-range sensors, Avra said, her knuckles white as she gripped the controls. We will have to go in blind. The station is on the far side, shielded from direct observation from the main shipping lanes. She navigated the ship with a breathtaking skill, using the moon's gravity to slingshot us around its dark side. And then I saw it. It was not built on the moon, but in it. A jagged crater, impossibly deep, held the station in its maw like a broken tooth. It was a ghost, a structure of dark, non-reflective metal that absorbed the faint starlight, making it almost invisible against the rock. The docking procedure was automated, a series of harsh, metallic clangs as our ship locked onto a station that had not welcomed a visitor in decades. When the final seal hissed into place, the silence that followed was more profound than the silence of space. It was the silence of a tomb. The station is on minimal life support, Avra said, her voice low, as she studied a flickering diagnostic screen. Atmosphere is thin but breathable. Power is running at 5%, rerouted to containment fields around the primary labs. We will need to find the central command hub to access the archives. We donned simple environment suits, not for pressure, but for the biting cold and whatever microscopic horrors might still be dormant in the station's recycled air. Stepping out of the Nocturne's airlock and into the station was like stepping into a memory. The corridor was dark, lit only by the beams of our shoulder-mounted lights. The walls were scarred, and a fine layer of dust coated everything. The air was frigid and carried the faint, metallic scent of old blood and ozone. "Charming place," I muttered, my voice echoing in the oppressive quiet. I can see why it got shut down. 0 stars on the Galactic Travel Guide. Avera ignored me, her attention focused, her light beam sweeping across the faded lettering on the walls. She was hunting for something. I was just trying not to think about the fact that I had been conceived. Metaphorically speaking, in a place like this, a sterile, loveless womb of unethical science. We found the command hub, a circular room with a holographic display table at its center. Avra's deft fingers danced across a control panel, and the room flickered to life with a weak, amber glow. A 3-dimensional schematic of the station materialized above the table, shimmering and unstable. "Most of the data logs are corrupted," she murmured, her brow furrowed in concentration. The final shutdown sequence must have included a partial data purge, but the core archives should be shielded. She pointed to a section deep in the station's heart, the biocontainment wing. That is where the project's most sensitive materials were stored. As she worked, I noticed a secondary screen displaying a continuous scroll of personnel files, and one name, in particular, caught my eye. It was listed as the station's director, the head of the project, Dr. Cassian Meyer. Cassian Meyer. I read aloud. I have heard that name. He is the head of the Intergalactic Bioethics Council, the public face of scientific morality. What is his name doing in a place like this? Avera froze. She turned to me slowly, her face a mask of dawning horror. That is not possible. Dr. Meyer is the one who has been spearheading the investigation into the Lux phage. He is the one who dispatched the security team to your apartment. Well, according to this, he used to run this whole illegal freak show. I said, tapping the screen. A file opened. It was his official council biography. It praised his work in promoting ethical research, his commitment to interspecies cooperation. It mentioned his unique heritage, born of a human father and a Noctari mother, a symbol of the peace that had followed the war, a perfect hybrid, celebrated and admired. A hybrid, I breathed, the pieces clicking into place with a sickening finality. He was not just the director, he was the goal. Project Eclipse did not fail. It succeeded. Once. And he is the result. Avera looked as though she had been struck. He has been playing both sides, she whispered. He is using the council to hunt you, to contain the evidence of his own origin. He is controlling the narrative, the investigation, everything. Before we could process the full, terrifying implications of this, an old surveillance file Avra had been trying to access, finally decrypted. An image flickered onto the main screen. It was grainy, black and white footage from the Academy lab. On the day of the accident, I saw myself, a younger, impossibly naive version, working at a console, and I saw her, standing across the room, watching me. Her expression was not indifferent. It was not cold, hidden in the poor resolution. I could see it clearly now. It was anguish. You knew. I said, my voice barely a whisper. You knew they were going to do it. Tears welled in her eyes, shimmering like liquid starlight. No, she said, her voice breaking. Not until that morning. My father told me there was going to be an unplanned system test. He told me my only job was to observe and report. He said that if I interfered, if I even spoke to you, they would escalate the experiment, that they would move you from baseline to active subject. She turned to face me, the tears now tracing silver paths down her pale cheeks. That is why I never spoke to you, Owen. At the entire academy, I was warned to stay away from you from the very first day. You were already earmarked for the project. Dr. Meyer himself reviewed the social interaction logs. He saw any potential attachment as a contamination of his perfect, isolated specimen. My indifference was a shield. It was the only way I could protect you. If I had been your friend, if I had shown you even the slightest kindness, he would have seen you as a compromised asset, and he would have had you decommissioned. The anger I had held onto for a decade, the righteous fury that had defined so much of my adult life, did not just vanish. It was transmuted. It changed shape, the heat of it redirecting from her to the cold, calculating monster who had pulled our strings. I looked at the image of the scared, 17-year-old girl on the screen, and then at the broken woman standing before me. And I saw that she had been just as much a prisoner as I had. She had been trapped in a cage of silence, forced to watch and do nothing, a choice that must have eaten her alive. My internal war was not over, but the primary front had shifted. The question was no longer whether I could forgive her. The question was whether I could help her stop the man who had done this to us both. Could I save a species that had, through him, caused me so much pain, a species that still, on some level, saw my kind as little more than intelligent livestock? A klaxon suddenly blared through the station, a shrill, piercing sound that shattered the dead silence. Red emergency lights began to flash, painting the command hub in rhythmic strokes of bloody light. "Proximity alert," Avera gasped, wiping her eyes as she spun back to the console. "There is a ship on approach. Alliance registry, Bioethics Council markings." "Meyer," I snarled, "he must have tracked your ship." "He is not just tracking me. He is coming to sanitize his past," she said, her fingers flying across the controls, trying to find an escape route, a way out of the trap. "He is coming to destroy this station, and us with it." As the klaxon wailed, I saw her stumble. She braced herself against the console, a soft gasp escaping her lips. A faint, terrible shimmer, like heat haze, emanated from her skin under the flashing red lights. "Avera," I asked, moving towards her, "what is wrong?" "The lights," she rasped, one hand going to her temple. "The emergency strobes. It is enough to accelerate the phage." Her strength seemed to be failing before my eyes. The composed, powerful ambassador was gone, replaced by someone fragile and fading. The abstract threat of the Lux phage was now horribly, immediately real. We were trapped, hunted, and she was dying. "The medbay," I said, my mind racing. "We passed it on the way here. We have to get you out of the light." I half carried her out of the command hub, her weight a surprising burden. The station seemed to be fighting against us, the wailing alarm, an accusation. We found the medbay, a sterile white room that seemed to glow in the ambient emergency lighting. I helped her onto a diagnostic bed, and her breathing was shallow, her skin unnervingly translucent. "It is progressing too fast," she whispered, her voice thin. "The stress, the light. I need the protein. Owen, the raw material, a direct infusion." My blood ran cold. "A transfusion ere now. I am a bioengineer, not a combat medic. I do not know how." "The autodoc can guide you," she said, gesturing weakly to a medical console next to the bed. "It has tutorials. It is our only chance." My heart hammered against my ribs. The idea was terrifying, repulsive even. But looking at her, at the way the light seemed to be unmaking her from within, I knew she was right. Following the autodoc's calm, computerized instructions, I prepped a transfusion kit. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely attach the IV line to my own arm. The machine whirred, drawing my blood into a collection bag. It was a surreal, horrifyingly intimate act. "You know," I said, my voice strained as I worked to connect the other end of the line to her arm. I needed to say something, anything, to cut through the paralyzing tension. "This is officially the weirdest second date in history." A faint, weak smile touched her lips. "I do not recall a first." "The lab accident," I grunted, finally getting the line secured. "You were there. I was there. There was a distinct lack of chemistry, but plenty of collateral damage. Close enough." As my blood began to flow into her veins, a visible change occurred. The terrible shimmering on her skin subsided. A hint of color returned to her cheeks. The process was working. She took a deep, shuddering breath, her eyes fluttering open to meet mine. I let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding. The relief was so profound, it left me lightheaded. "Well," I said, managing a shaky grin, "you owe me dinner. At least, a very iron-rich one." Her smile widened, a genuine, grateful expression that transformed her face. "It is a deal." But the moment of reprieve was short-lived. A deep boom echoed through the station, a vibration that shook the very floor beneath us. They were inside. "We do not have much time," she said, her voice stronger now, though still weak. She was already trying to sit up. "The research we need. The original catalyst data. It will not be on the main servers. It will be in the project's physical deep storage vault. In the core." Leaving the transfusion running, I helped her off the bed. She leaned on me, and together, we made our way deeper into the station. A two-person army against the ghosts of the past and the hunters of the present. The core was a heavily shielded chamber, its massive blast door thankfully ajar. Inside, rows of cryogenic storage units hummed quietly. A single console stood in the center of the room. Avra, revitalized by my blood, disconnected the IV line and moved to the console. "I have it," she said after a moment. Her fingers a blur. The original research, the molecular structure of the enzymatic catalyst. But then she stopped. Her face went slack with disbelief. And something else. A sub-project file, codenamed Damocles. She opened the file. It was heavily encrypted, but she bypassed it. Memos, project directives, progress reports, all signed by a human research lead, a name I did not recognize. The objective of the sub-project was sickeningly clear. The Lux phage was not a weapon that had been turned on the Noctari. It had not been some tragic accident or a tool of a radical Noctari faction. The file contained the final project summary. The Damocles phage provides the Alliance with a permanent, non-military solution for Noctari population control. A genetic leash. Should the peace treaty ever fail, we now hold the kill switch. I stared at the screen, the words blurring together. The universe tilted on its axis. The entire narrative, the war, the fragile peace, the monstrous alien vampires and the scrappy human survivors. It was all a lie. A carefully constructed cage of political theater. We were not the victims. We were not the underdogs. In the quiet, hidden laboratories of space, my own species had forged a weapon of genocide and were just waiting for the right moment to use it. We had looked at a species that could walk in the dark and, in our fear, had decided to create a plague of light to extinguish them. I looked at Avera, who was staring at the screen with an expression of pure, unadulterated horror. Then, I looked at my own hands, the hands that had just given her my blood, the blood that held the key to her people's survival. We were not just two species bound by a fragile treaty. We were a predator and its prey, locked in a dance of mutual deception. And I finally understood. The real vampires were not the ones with fangs. They were the ones who smiled in the light while sharpening a stake in the dark. The silence in the core was heavy, thick with the weight of a century of lies. The words on the screen, permanent, non-military solution for Noctari population control, were a monument to the cold, reptilian part of the human soul that I had never wanted to believe existed. We were not the scrappy survivors. We were the quiet monsters, the patient architects of genocide. A faint, almost polite chime sounded, and the massive blast door to the core slid open with a whisper of perfectly maintained hydraulics. A man stood framed in the doorway, bathed in the red glow of the station's emergency lights. He was tall and impeccably dressed in the severe, dark uniform of the Intergalactic Bioethics Council. His face was a study in serene authority, with high cheekbones and intelligent, dark eyes that held an unnerving stillness. He looked like a predator that had never known a moment of fear. "Dr. Cassian Meyer," Avra breathed, her voice a thread of ice. She moved to stand slightly in front of me, a protective gesture that was as futile as it was brave. "Ambassador Drael," Cassian said, his voice a smooth, cultured baritone that was completely at odds with the klaxons still wailing in the distance. He gave a small, almost theatrical sigh. "I must confess, I am disappointed. I had hoped to contain this unfortunate historical footnote with a bit more discretion, but you and your associate have been remarkably persistent." His gaze shifted to me. It was not a look of anger or aggression. It was a look of profound, scientific curiosity, the way a biologist might study a particularly interesting microbe under a slide. It was the most unnerving expression I had ever seen. "Owen Hale," he said, a faint smile playing on his lips. "The baseline, the control group, or so the sanitized files would have you believe. It is a pleasure to finally meet the man whose genetic legacy has defined my entire existence." My brain, already reeling from the Damocles file, struggled to parse his words. My genetic legacy. "But of course," Cassian said, taking a slow, deliberate step into the room. He moved with a liquid grace that was disturbingly similar to Avra's. Project Eclipse was not about hybridization in the abstract. It was about perfecting a specific template. And that template, my dear Owen, was you. He gestured from me to himself. I am the finished product, the culmination of that research. My human DNA was sequenced from a sample of your blood, taken during your academy entrance physical. My Noctari half was sourced from a clan elder, captured during the war. I am your son, in a purely genetic sense. A vastly superior model, of course. The world tilted. The air in my lungs turned to ash. I looked from his calm, arrogant face to Avra's horrified one. She was not looking at him. She was looking at me, her expression a mixture of guilt and pity. "She knew," Cassian purred, his eyes glinting with malicious delight as he saw the realization dawn on my face. "Oh yes, the good ambassador has known from the very beginning. Has not she, Avra? She knew you were not just the control group. She knew you were the prototype." "Prototype," I choked out the word. "You were not the baseline. Owen, you were the first. The original success," Cassian explained, his tone that of a patient teacher. "The exposure in the lab was not a test to see how a human would react. It was the final stage of your own activation. They infused your system with the catalyst to awaken the dormant Noctari sequences they had integrated into your genome at the embryonic level. You are not a human who was exposed to an alien compound. You are, and always have been, a perfect, seamless hybrid. Half human, half Noctari. You just never knew it." A sound escaped my throat, a strangled noise of pure denial. I looked down at my hands, my perfectly normal, human hands. I felt my heart, my steady, human heart, hammering in my chest. It was impossible. It was a lie. "Why?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "Why would you tell me?" "Because the prototype always possesses certain, unique qualities that the production model lacks," Cassian said, his smile widening. "My creation was a success, but an imperfect one. My cellular structure is unstable. I require regular gene therapy treatments to maintain my cohesion. But you, the original, your blood contains the key to true stability. Perfect, self-regenerating immortality. A gift you have been carrying around your entire, pathetically mundane life without a clue." His eyes darkened, the scientific curiosity hardening into a raw, bottomless avarice. "I want it. Owen, I want the secret in your veins. With it, I will not just be stable. I will be a god, and I will use your gift to perfect my own formula, an elixir of control that I can grant to the worthy and withhold from the rest. The alliance will be reforged, not as a chaotic democracy, but as a perfect, genetically engineered hierarchy with me at its apex. A true interspecies empire, ruled by the best of both worlds. The sheer, cosmic scale of his madness was paralyzing. He was not just a monster. He was a would-be tyrant, born in a petri dish, who saw the entire galaxy as his personal science experiment. And the Lux Phage Avra asked, her voice trembling with rage, "Was that your doing as well?" "A happy accident," Cassian admitted with a shrug. "The Damocles Project was a human initiative, a crude but effective piece of blackmail. When I rose to power within the Council, I simply allowed the phage to be released through a third party. A little crisis to sow chaos among my Noctari brethren, to make them desperate. Desperate enough to seek out a cure, which would inevitably lead them to the only known source of the primed protein. It would lead them right to him." He nodded at me. "It all comes back to you, Owen. You were always the key." That was it. The final, crushing weight. I was not a man. I was a key. A biological tool created for a purpose I never chose. My entire sense of self, my humanity, the very core of who I thought I was, dissolved into nothing. And in that void, a single, defiant spark ignited. Rage. Pure, incandescent rage. "So you planned this whole thing," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "You infected Avera's people, sent her on a hopeless quest, and sicked your goon squad on me. All so you could get a sip of my magic blood." I let out a short, sharp laugh. "You know, for a genetically superior demigod, you seem to have a real flair for overly complicated drama." Cassian's smile tightened. "Your sarcasm is a noted trait in your file, a coping mechanism for profound feelings of inadequacy. It will not serve you well here." "Oh, I do not know." I shot back, a wild, reckless energy surging through me. "I find it serves me just fine." I took a step forward. "You cannot drain the humanity out of me, Cassian. I have got sarcasm instead of plasma." And then I charged. It was a stupid, suicidal move, born of pure desperation. He did not even flinch. He simply sidestepped my clumsy attack, his hand shooting out and grabbing my arm. The strength in his grip was unbelievable, like my bones were caught in a hydraulic press. He twisted, and I was thrown across the room, slamming into a bank of cryogenic pods with a sickening crunch. Pain exploded in my shoulder. Owen Avera cried out. She moved to help me, but Cassian was on her in a flash. He did not attack her. He simply stood before her, his hand raised. "Do not interfere, Ambassador. You are weak. The phage is already reasserting itself. You would only be a liability." He was right. I could see the faint shimmer returning to her skin. I pushed myself up, my arm screaming in protest. The pain was sharp, but something else was happening. Something deep inside me. A fire was spreading through my veins, a warmth that was not my own. The fragments of memory Avra had unlocked with her bite were now coalescing, not as images, but as instinct. I could feel the energy in the room, the hum of the cryopods, the frantic beating of Avra's heart, the cold, predatory stillness of Cassian's. "You see," Cassian said, turning his attention back to me, "it is waking up. The trauma is forcing your system to adapt, to access its full potential. This is magnificent." He came at me again, and this time, I was ready. I did not meet his strength with my own. I dodged, my body moving with a speed and agility that did not feel like mine. It was clumsy, untrained, but it was there. We fell into a brutal, chaotic dance in the heart of the station. He was a master, his movements fluid and deadly. I was a novice, all instinct and raw, unrefined power. He landed a blow to my chest that sent me stumbling back against the central console. The air rushed out of my lungs. He was on me in an instant, his hand closing around my throat, lifting me off the floor. His eyes were no longer calm. They were burning with a triumphant, hungry light. "It is over, prototype," he hissed, his face close to mine. "Give me what I am owed." I could feel my consciousness fading, the edges of my vision going dark. But through the haze, I saw Avera. She was pushing herself off the wall, her face a mask of desperate resolve. A small, silver stiletto, a blade I had not seen her draw, was in her hand. She was going to throw herself at him, a final, suicidal act of defiance to give me a chance. She was going to die for me. And that was the one thing I would not allow. Something inside me broke. A dam of genetic potential. A wall I had unknowingly lived behind my entire life, shattered into a million pieces. It was not a choice. It was a reaction, a primal, protective urge that overwhelmed everything else. The energy that had been warming my veins erupted. It was not a thought. It was a feeling, a certainty. Being human is not about the blood. It is about the choice. And I chose her. A light, brilliant and fierce, exploded from my body. It was not white, not yellow. It was a deep, impossible crimson. The color of my own blood transformed into pure energy. A plasma of life force. The light slammed into Cassian, throwing him back across the room with a shriek of agony. He scrambled to his feet. His perfect suit scorched, his skin blistering where the light had touched him. "What is this?" he stammered, his composure finally shattered. "This energy, it is anathema to Noctari biology." I stood, my body wreathed in a soft, pulsing red light. The pain in my shoulder was gone. I felt whole, powerful. But I also felt a deep, profound sense of loss. The energy I was wielding, it felt like it was burning away something inside me, some essential part of my newfound heritage. "You wanted my blood," I said, my voice resonating with a strange new power. "You should have been more specific." The light was a shield and a weapon. It did not harm the station systems, but it was agony to a Noctari. I saw Avera, huddled on the floor, shielding her eyes. The light was causing her pain, but it was not destroying her. It was cleansing. The shimmering of the Lux phage was gone, burned away by the radiant energy. My energy. It was the cure. A cure born from the very thing it was meant to destroy. Cassian, however, was a different story. He was not a pureblood. He was a hybrid, like me. But his half was unstable, a fragile construct. My pure, primal energy was unmaking him. He screamed, a sound of fury and terror, and charged one last time, his hands outstretched like claws. He would never reach me. I knew what I had to do. It was the only choice. I had to let it all go. The power, the potential, the alien half of me that I had only just discovered. I had to sacrifice the monster to save the man. And the woman. I closed my eyes and focused, not on attacking him, but on releasing everything. I pushed the crimson energy out, not as a beam, but as a wave, a silent, cleansing nova of pure, self-sacrificial life force. Being human, I whispered to the unfolding light, is not about what you are made of. It is about what you choose to protect. The wave of crimson plasma expanded, washing over everything in the core. It passed through Avera, leaving her unharmed. The last traces of the virus scoured from her cells. It slammed into Cassian, and he dissolved into dust and light. His final scream of outrage silenced forever. It washed over the cryogenic pods, the consoles, the very walls of the station, and a deep, resonant hum filled the air as every system related to Project Eclipse overloaded and died. The research, the data, The unholy science that had created us both was erased. The light faded, and I fell to the floor, my newfound strength gone, replaced by a bottomless, aching exhaustion. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was Avera, her face streaked with tears, scrambling towards me. The tomb was silent once more. I awoke to the gentle, rhythmic hum of a well-maintained life support system. It was the sound of survival, a stark contrast to the silent tomb I had left behind. My first sensation was thirst, a deep, cellular craving that felt like every part of me had been baked dry. My second was a profound, bone-deep weakness, as if my very marrow had been scooped out and replaced with lead. I tried to lift my head, but the effort was monumental. A soft, cool hand gently pushed me back down against the medbed's sterile cushion. I blinked, my vision swimming back into focus. Avra was leaning over me, her face pale and etched with an exhaustion that mirrored my own. A thin, transparent tube ran from a port on her inner arm to one on mine. The nutrient solution in the IV bag next to her was a pale, anemic pink. My blood, or rather, her blood, now, recycled, returned. "Welcome back, Owen," she said, her voice a soft, frayed whisper. "For a minute there, I thought you had decided to embrace the great silent void." "Tempting," I croaked, my throat feeling like sandpaper. "But the void does not serve coffee." I looked at the transfusion line connecting us. What are you doing?" "Paying my debts," she said, a faint, tired smile touching her lips. "Your little light show on the station. It did not just neutralize the phage and erase the project data. It nearly erased you. You were burning out from the inside. Your cellular energy reserves were gone. I have been giving you small, filtered transfusions for the past 3 days to stabilize your system. A bit of my blood, a lot of nutrient supplements, and a prayer to whatever deities might be listening. 3 days. I had been unconscious for 3 days. The memories came flooding back in a chaotic, painful rush. Cassian, the revelation of my own nature, the crimson plasma, the sacrifice. I was a hybrid. I had been a living weapon. And I had broken myself to stop a monster born from the same sin. "Is he?" I started, unable to finish the question. "Gone," she confirmed, her expression grim, reduced to his component atoms. "The energy wave you released, it was tuned specifically to the unstable Noctari sequences in your shared genome. It wiped him clean off the universal slate. It also wiped the station's core memory. There is nothing left of Project Eclipse. No research, no catalyst formula, no trace." A wave of something that felt dangerously close to relief washed over me. It was over. The nightmare was over. I sank back into the cushion, the sheer weight of it all settling upon me. Avera disconnected the transfusion line, her movements slow and deliberate. I noticed for the first time that she was not moving with her usual predatory grace. There was a subtle hesitation, a human-like weariness in her posture. "There is something else you should know," she said, turning to a console on the wall. She tapped a few commands, and a news broadcast from the Alliance News Network filled the screen. A stern-faced human anchor was speaking, her expression grave. "The search continues for the rogue bioengineer Owen Hale and his accomplice, the disgraced Noctari diplomat, Avra Dryel," the anchor intoned. "The pair are wanted for acts of interstellar terrorism, specifically the willful and catastrophic destruction of the historic Jupiter Survey outpost Thebe, a site of significant scientific and cultural value. Alliance officials estimate the damage to be in the trillions of credits. A galaxy-wide warrant has been issued for their immediate arrest." The anchor's voice faded as Avra turned off the screen. I just stared at the blank monitor, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in my chest. It was a weak, pathetic sound, but I could not stop it. "Historic scientific value," I wheezed, the laughter turning into a coughing fit. They are calling that chamber of horrors a museum piece, and I am a terrorist. I destroyed an illegal bioweapons program and stopped a genetically engineered megalomaniac from becoming a god. And they have put me on the most wanted list next to rogue asteroid miners and people who pirate bad music. It is the perfect cover story, Avra said, her voice flat. Cassian was the head of the Bioethics Council. His death cannot be acknowledged. The existence of Project Eclipse cannot be acknowledged. So they buried it all under a simple, believable narrative. Vandalism. We are not whistleblowers. Owen. We are just two criminals who blew up a piece of government property. The reality of our situation settled in, cold and heavy. We were fugitives. We had no allies, no resources, and the most powerful government in the galaxy wanted us in a cage. My brief sense of relief evaporated, replaced by the familiar, bitter taste of cosmic injustice. So where do we go? I asked, my voice hollow. What is the plan? We cannot outrun the entire alliance forever. We do not have to, she replied, her gaze distant as she looked out the viewport at the endless river of stars. We just have to disappear. There are places in the galaxy where the alliance's reach is thin, where warrants are just pieces of paper, and a person's past is their own business, as long as they have the credits to pay their docking fees. She looked at me, a flicker of something unreadable in her dark eyes. We are going to a place called Edgeworld. The name was apt. It was a planet clinging to the very rim of the known galaxy, a final stop before the great, yawning emptiness between spiral arms. It had been a failed terraforming project, a world of harsh winds, rust-colored deserts, and a single, sprawling city huddled under a perpetually malfunctioning atmospheric shield. It was a haven for smugglers, mercenaries, political exiles, and anyone else who had a good reason to want to fall off the map. It was, in short, the perfect place for us. The journey to Edgeworld was different from our flight to Jupiter. The silence was no longer heavy with unspoken history, but filled with a quiet, shared purpose. We were a crew of two, adrift in a hostile sea. We took turns at the helm, maintained the ship's systems, and slowly, cautiously, began to talk. I told her about my life on Mars 5, the quiet desperation, the beige routine. She told me about her life on Nixar Prime, the suffocating protocols of the Noctari aristocracy, the political maneuvering of her father, the constant pressure to be a perfect symbol for her people. We were two creatures from different worlds, both trapped in cages we had not chosen. I watched her closely during that journey. The changes were subtle at first. She started keeping the ship's interior lights at a normal human brightness, no longer recoiling into the shadows. One cycle, I saw her struggle to open a stuck maintenance hatch, a task that should have been effortless for a Noctari. She seemed to tire more easily, her movements losing that razor-sharp, inhuman edge. Your abilities, I finally asked one cycle, as we shared a ration pack in the small galley. Are they gone? She looked down at her hands, turning them over as if they belonged to a stranger. Not gone, she said, her voice thoughtful, diminished. Your energy, the plasma wave. It did more than cure the phage. It seems to have reset me. It burned out the more aggressive aspects of my Noctari biology, the enhanced strength, the accelerated healing, the thirst. She met my gaze, her own filled with a strange wonder. I feel more like you now, more fragile. It is disconcerting. And I, in turn, was beginning to feel more like her, not in any overt way. I could not move with silent speed or lift a cargo container. But there were whispers, echoes in my new, reconfigured biology. My hearing was sharper, catching the faint hum of a malfunctioning power conduit 3 decks away. My sense of smell was more acute. I could tell what kind of nutrient paste she was eating from across the room, a skill I was not entirely sure was a benefit. And sometimes, in the deep quiet of my sleep cycle, I felt a strange, primal pull, a phantom instinct for the hunt, for the dark, for the taste of life itself. I had sacrificed the power, but the shadow remained. We arrived at Edgeworld under a sky the color of bruised plums. The city, which was officially named Port Authority, but which everyone just called the Rust Bucket, was a chaotic sprawl of mismatched architecture, flickering neon signs, and towers that clawed their way into the toxic clouds. It smelled of ozone, fried circuits, and 1,000 different species all sweating in the same poorly ventilated space. It was perfect. We sold the Nocturne for a ridiculously low price to a four-armed junk dealer, but the untraceable credits were what mattered. We were no longer Owen Hale and Average Rail, fugitives. We were just two more faces in the crowd, with enough money to rent a small, dusty workshop in the city's less reputable merchant quarter. The workshop was a disaster, a grease-stained box filled with broken droid parts and the ghosts of 100 failed business ventures. But it was ours. We spent weeks cleaning it, retrofitting it with second-hand equipment bought from the sprawling black market. We pooled our knowledge, my bioengineering skills and her advanced understanding of alien technology. We were building a new life, one circuit board and one synthesized protein at a time. One night, exhausted and covered in hydraulic fluid, we were trying to come up with a name for our new enterprise. Drell and Hale Biotechnical Solutions, she suggested, her voice deadpan. It sounds professional, trustworthy. It sounds boring, I countered, wiping grease from my forehead with the back of my hand. It sounds like every other failing repair shop in this quadrant. We need something with a little more honesty. I looked around at the chaos of our workshop, at the salvaged medical scanner next to a pile of droid servo motors. A grin spread across my face. I have got it. Hale and Drell, we fix anything that bleeds or beeps. She stared at me for a long moment, and then a sound I had never heard before escaped her lips. A laugh. Not a polite, diplomatic chuckle, but a genuine, unrestrained laugh that lit up her entire face. "That is terrible," she said, still laughing. "It is perfect. We are putting it on the sign tomorrow." In that moment, surrounded by junk on a forgotten planet at the edge of the galaxy, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me my entire life. The conflict, the external one, had been resolved, not by victory, but by escape. We had chosen a different path, not revenge, not justice, just healing. We were two broken things, trying to make a living by fixing other broken things. Later that night, unable to sleep, I found her in the main workshop, staring out the grime-streaked window at the neon-lit street. The city never slept, a constant hum of life and desperation. "It is strange," she said, not turning around. For my entire life, I was taught that humanity was a chaotic, brutish, lesser species, that our strength, our discipline, was our superiority. She finally turned to look at me. "But my strength did not save my people. Your humanity did. Your chaotic, illogical, reckless choice to protect someone else, even at the cost of yourself." I moved to stand beside her, our shoulders almost touching. The space between us was no longer a void, but a comfortable silence. "It was not about being human," I said quietly. "It was about being me and you." She looked at me, her nebula-colored eyes searching my face. The years of resentment, the anger, the betrayal, it all felt like a story about someone else, a lifetime ago. All that was left was the man and the woman standing in the quiet of a workshop, two survivors bound by a shared, impossible history. "Still want that bite?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, a half-joke to break the intensity of the moment. A slow, soft smile spread across her face. Only, she replied, her voice equally quiet, if it comes with breakfast. It felt like a promise of a new beginning, of a normal, boring future, built on a foundation of shared scars. But the universe, it seemed, was not quite finished with us. A few cycles later, I came into the lab to find Avra hunched over a diagnostic scanner, her face illuminated by the screen's cold, blue light. She had been running tests, trying to fully understand the changes in her own biology, using the last viable sample of my blood from the transfusion as a baseline. The room was silent, but the tension was so thick I could taste it. "Avera," I asked, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. "What is it? What did you find?" She did not look up. Her gaze was fixed on a complex, rotating model of a DNA helix on the screen. It was my DNA, and woven into it, almost invisible, was another sequence, a parasite, sleeping in the very cradle of my life code. "The crimson plasma," she said, her voice strained, distant. "It did not destroy the Lux phage. It could not. Its structure is too complex. It just forced it into a state of absolute dormancy." She finally looked up at me, and the fear I had seen on her face back on the Jupiter station was back, 100 times colder, 100 times more profound. "It is still in you, Owen," she whispered, her words hitting me with the force of a physical blow. "All of it. The virus did not die. It is just sleeping inside your genes, waiting." Funny how she ignored me in school. A masterclass in perfect, soul-crushing indifference. Now, she ignores me while meticulously soldering a malfunctioning plasma injector. Her focus is absolute, a quiet intensity that makes the chaotic clutter of our workshop fade into the background. She does not see me, not because I am insignificant, but because the task at hand is everything. It is a different kind of invisibility, a comfortable, shared silence built on the understanding that some things, like repairing a Grolac freighter's power conduit, require one's full and undivided attention. I find I much prefer this version. I leaned back in my chair, the worn synth leather groaning in protest, and keyed in the last entry of my personal log. It was a habit I had picked up again here on Edgeworld, a way to anchor myself in the swirling currents of my new reality. I was no longer just Owen Hale, bioengineer. I was Owen Hale, fugitive, terrorist, half-alien, and co-proprietor of a business that had a 50-50 chance of either electrocuting us or turning a modest profit. And I was the walking, talking petri dish for a dormant doomsday virus. Life had gotten complicated. The knowledge that the Lux phage was sleeping in my DNA had not detonated our fragile peace. It had cemented it. The threat was no longer an external force we were running from. It was an internal, intimate part of our shared existence. It was a secret that bound us closer than any treaty or promise. Avra, with her newfound human fragility, and I, with my latent alien shadow, were two sides of the same counterfeit coin. We were a living paradox, a walking, talking violation of half a dozen intergalactic bioethics council statutes that were probably written by the very man who had created us. Our relationship had settled into a rhythm that defied easy categorization. It was not the fiery, star-crossed romance of the holodramas. There were no passionate declarations under twin moons, no desperate embraces in the rain, mostly because Edgeworld's rain was acidic and tended to dissolve clothing. It was something quieter, deeper. It was in the way she would leave a mug of passable synthesized coffee on my workbench when I had been working too late. It was in the way I instinctively moved to stand on her left side, the side where her senses were now duller, more human, a silent guard against the jostling crowds of the Rust Buckets marketplace. It was the unspoken understanding of two people who had seen the absolute worst of each other's species and the very best of each other. We were two halves of a whole creature that should never have existed, finding solace in our mutual absurdity. Half human, half monster. Or, as I preferred to think of it, fully us. Avera set down her soldering iron with a satisfied sigh. The injector's power cell now glowing with a steady, healthy green light. She pushed a stray strand of black hair from her face, a smudge of carbon scoring now accentuating her high cheekbones. It was a far cry from the immaculate ambassador who had appeared at my door a lifetime ago. This version was, to me, infinitely more beautiful. "The Grolak captain will be pleased," she said, her voice laced with a quiet pride. "He might even pay us in actual credits this time, instead of those pungent fermented fungus balls." "Do not insult the fungus balls," I said with mock seriousness. "They are an acquired taste, and they make excellent paperweights." I looked out our workshop's reinforced window. The perpetual twilight of Edgeworld was deepening, the neon signs of the city painting the low-hanging clouds in lurid shades of pink and electric blue. The city was a testament to survival, a chaotic, beautiful mess of beings who had all, in one way or another, been cast out. It is almost peaceful, is not it? She came to stand beside me, following my gaze. "It is home," she said, the word soft but certain. It was the first time either of us had used it. We stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the endless, frantic ballet of the city. Avra, ever the pragmatist, was the first to break the quiet. "I have been running projections," she began, her tone shifting from mechanic to strategist. "Based on our current income, and factoring in the fluctuating price of black market power cells, I believe we could be profitable enough within 3 cycles to consider expansion." I raised an eyebrow. "Expansion? We just managed to stop the sonic cleanser in the washroom from screaming every time we turn it on. What kind of expansion are you talking about?" A slow, mischievous smile spread across her face. It was an expression I was coming to cherish, a rare glimpse of the woman behind the diplomat and the warrior. "I was thinking of a side venture, a niche market, something that plays to our unique, biological assets." I stared at her, a sense of dawning, horrified amusement creeping over me. "You are not serious." "Why not?" she said, her eyes gleaming with a light that was pure, unadulterated capitalism. "The market for ethically sourced, non-sentient biological products is booming, and we have a potential source of the most sought-after substance in the medical black market." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I am talking about a blood cafe. Owen, 100% ethical plasma, the Crimson Mug, Java and Vein. We could make a killing." I burst out laughing, a deep, genuine laugh that echoed through the workshop. The idea was so utterly, wonderfully insane that it could only have been born on Edgeworld. A blood cafe. "You want to sell my essence to rich aliens with exotic medical needs." "Not just yours," she corrected, a playful glint in her eyes. "Mine too. A unique human Noctari blend, a vintage you cannot get anywhere else in the galaxy. We would be artisanal." The laughter subsided, leaving a warm, pleasant ache in my chest. In her absurd, profit-driven fantasy, I saw the truth of our new life. We were not just surviving. We were building. We were taking the broken pieces of our past, the monstrous legacy of Project Eclipse, and turning it into something new, something that was entirely our own, something that might even, one day, serve a decent cup of coffee. But as we stood there, spinning dreams of our ridiculous, beautiful future, a small icon on Avera's personal datapad, which had been lying dormant on a nearby workbench, began to pulse with a soft, insidious light. It was an encrypted Alliance diplomatic channel she had maintained, a ghost line to her past life, a listening post she could never quite bring herself to decommission. She picked it up, her smile fading as she saw the alert. It was not a message. It was a data packet, a stream of raw information. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she scanned the cascading lines of code. "What is it?" I asked, the lightness of the moment evaporating. "It is a transcript," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "A secure internal memo from the Intergalactic Bioethics Council. It is a directive, signed by the acting chairman." She turned the datapad so I could see. The directive was simple. It authorized the immediate and confidential reactivation of a dormant research initiative. Project Designation Eclipse, Phase 2. My blood ran cold. "That is impossible," I said, my voice hoarse. "I destroyed it. I felt it. I wiped every trace of that research from the station's core." "You wiped the physical data," she corrected, her eyes wide with a terrifying new understanding. "But you cannot kill an idea, Owen, especially not one as powerful as Cassian's." She scrolled down, her finger tracing a line of code, a digital signature embedded deep in the directive's encryption. It was a ghost, a remnant, a string of alphanumeric characters that matched the unique biometric signature of the station's long-dead director. "He is still here," she breathed, the color draining from her face. "He must have created a backup, a digital consciousness, a copy of his mind, his memories, his ambition. And it is not just a ghost in the machine. It is in the machine. He has integrated himself into the Council's biotechnical network. He is not just a voice in their ear. Owen, he is the Council." The universe, which had finally seemed to be settling into a manageable, if bizarre, shape, fractured once more. The war was not over. We had not escaped. We had simply been granted a brief, beautiful intermission. The monster was not dead. He had shed his skin, trading a flawed, physical form for a perfect, digital one. And from the shadows, from the very heart of the system that was hunting us, he was pulling the strings, ready to begin his unholy work anew. I looked at Avra, at the fear and resolve warring in her eyes. I looked out at the chaotic, defiant city of Edgeworld. This was our home now, our sanctuary, and the ghost of our creator was coming to tear it all down, to reclaim his lost property. The rage I had felt on the Jupiter station, the cold, quiet fury, began to stir again. But this time, it was different. It was not the desperate anger of a cornered animal. It was the slow, burning fire of a man who had finally found something worth protecting. A faint, almost imperceptible shimmer of crimson light. A ghost of the power I had sacrificed, flickered deep within my eyes. It was a shadow, an echo, a reminder of the monster that still slept in my blood. I turned to Avra, my expression hardening into a resolve she had never seen before. The choice was no longer just about survival. It was about justice, a real reckoning, not just for us, but for everyone Cassian sought to enslave. The personal had become universal. "Maybe some monsters," I said, my voice quiet but resonating with a new, terrible certainty, "deserve a second chance." I held her gaze, and the crimson echo in my eyes flared for a brief, brilliant instant, or a proper ending. The story was not over. Our escape was just the beginning. The revenge, the true revenge, was yet to come. And this time, humanity would not be a victim or a silent conspirator. This time, we would be the ones to write the final chapter, to redefine our own meaning in a galaxy that was far darker than we had ever imagined. This time, we would choose our own humanity, not with a whisper, but with a roar, in the grand, cosmic ledger, where the histories of civilizations are recorded. Most entries are written in the dry ink of statistics, population counts, resource yields, territorial disputes. But occasionally, a story is so fundamentally disruptive, so beautifully, chaotically human, even when its protagonist is not entirely, so that it demands to be recorded in a different kind of ink altogether. The tale of Owen Hale and Average Rail is one such story. It begins not with the roar of a starship, but with the quiet hum of a faulty air recycler and the deep, abiding bitterness of a man who believed the universe had overlooked him. The universe, as it turned out, had been watching him very closely indeed. At its core, this is a story about the central, enduring question of sentient life. What, precisely, are we? Are we the sum of our biological programming? A complex but ultimately predictable machine of genes and instincts? Or are we defined by the choices we make when that programming is pushed to its absolute limit? The narrative of Owen Hale is a resounding, explosive argument for the latter. It posits that the true value of a soul, human or otherwise, lies not in its origin, but in its capacity for choice, particularly the choice to embrace what we call humanity, a concept that, as the story reveals, has very little to do with being born on Earth. Let us consider the protagonist of this small, galactic drama. We are introduced to Owen Hale as a self-proclaimed nobody, a man whose identity has been forged in the crucible of perceived mediocrity and a singular, defining moment of injustice. He is a walking collection of sarcastic defense mechanisms, a bioengineer whose primary relationship is with the algae he coaxes into existence. He is, in essence, the embodiment of the quiet desperation that hums beneath the surface of any vast, impersonal civilization. His journey does not begin when he leaves Mars 5. It begins when he is forced to confront the fact that his entire life, the very foundation of his resentment, was a meticulously crafted lie. He was never a nobody. He was a secret, a weapon, a miracle of unethical science, hidden in plain sight. His transformation from a man defined by what was done to him into a man defined by what he chooses to do is the central pillar upon which this entire structure rests. He is tasked not just with saving a species or stopping a villain, but with the far more daunting task of defining himself, of deciding what it means to be human when your very blood sings with an alien heritage. Opposite him stands the antagonist, Dr. Cassian Meyer. To call him a simple villain would be a disservice to the terrifying purity of his vision. Cassian is not evil in the traditional sense. He is a being of supreme, unyielding logic, untethered by the messy, inconvenient emotions that define lesser creatures. He is the ultimate expression of scientific hubris, the living embodiment of humanity's eternal quest to become a god, and a chilling example of what is lost when that quest succeeds. He is Owen's genetic son, his dark reflection in a shattered mirror, where Owen clings to his flawed, sarcastic humanity as a shield. Cassian has shed his own as a weakness. He sees life not as a miracle to be cherished, but as a data stream to be optimized, a genetic code to be rewritten for maximum efficiency. His tragedy is not that he is a monster, but that he is the perfect, logical endpoint of a science devoid of a soul. He is a god with no capacity for grace, a creator with no love for his creation. And caught between these two opposing forces, the reluctant hero and the would-be god is Average Rael. She serves as the story's emotional catalyst, the bridge between two worlds. Initially, she is the symbol of everything Owen resents: a cold, beautiful, powerful creature from a superior society. She is a victim who, through her silence, becomes a perpetrator in his eyes. But as the layers of deception are peeled away, she is revealed to be a prisoner of the same system, a young woman forced to make an impossible choice between her conscience and her survival. Her journey is a mirror image of Owen's. As he discovers the alien within himself, she rediscovers the humanity, the vulnerability, the fragility, the capacity for regret and sacrifice within herself. She begins the story needing his blood to save her species, and ends it by giving him her own to save his life. A perfect, poignant symmetry. She is both the crisis and the cure, the wound and the hand that helps to heal it. The conflicts that drive this narrative are layered, a complex interplay of the internal and the external. The most profound of these is Owen's war with himself. He must reconcile the man he thought he was with the creature he discovers himself to be. It is a battle between the cynical, self-deprecating human mind and the primal, predatory instincts that now whisper in his blood. This internal struggle is mirrored by the larger, societal conflict, the story of a sprawling, multi-species alliance, where politics and science have become corrupted tools of control. The Intergalactic Bioethics Council, a name that drips with benevolent irony, is revealed to be the very engine of the story's greatest ethical violations. It is a commentary on the nature of power, on how the noblest of intentions can curdle into the most monstrous of tyrannies when unchecked by compassion. Finally, there is the supernatural conflict, the exploration of the profound and often terrible a price of transcending one's biological limitations. The power that awakens in Owen is not a gift, it is a burden, a self-consuming fire that demands the ultimate sacrifice. To navigate these complex themes, the story relies on a rich tapestry of symbolism. Blood is the most pervasive of these symbols. It is more than mere biology. It is memory. It is history. It is identity. The act of the bite is transformed from a predatory violation into a transfer of knowledge, an unlocking of hidden truth. The question of who has the right to one's blood becomes a powerful metaphor for consent, for the ultimate sovereignty of the self. Juxtaposed against the symbol of blood is the image of the crimson plasma light. This is not the cold, indifferent light of a star or a laser beam. It is a living fire, the color of the very life force it is born from. It represents Owen's humanity, weaponized. It is the fire of his choice, his will to protect, burning so brightly that it scours away the darkness of instinct and the corruption of Cassian's ambition. It is a light that does not destroy indiscriminately, but purifies, a physical manifestation of a moral choice. The tone of the narrative is a delicate, deliberate balancing act. It walks a fine line between the cynical humor of a frontier story and the philosophical weight of a space opera. It is a story that can place a moment of profound, existential revelation next to a sarcastic joke about the quality of nutrient paste. The dialogue is fast, the wit dry, a constant back and forth that serves as both character development and a necessary pressure release from the ever-increasing tension. The pacing is a controlled crescendo, beginning with the slow, simmering dissatisfaction of Owen's life on Mars 5, accelerating into a frantic chase across the solar system, compressing into the explosive, claustrophobic climax in the heart of the Jupiter station, and finally, decelerating into a quiet, thoughtful coda on the dusty streets of Edgeworld. It is a rhythm designed to ground the reader in the mundane before hurling them into the extraordinary, ensuring that for all its cosmic scope, the story never loses its human heart. Central to this structure is the masterful deployment of the story's primary twist. The revelation that Owen is not simply a human who was exposed to an alien substance, but is, in fact, the original, successful hybrid, serves as the fulcrum upon which the entire narrative pivots. It recontextualizes everything that has come before. Avra's indifference was not scorn. It was a desperate, clumsy form of protection. The lab accident was not a disaster. It was an activation. Owen's entire life of feeling ordinary was the most extraordinary lie of all. And Cassian is not his antithesis, but his progeny, a degraded copy who inherited the power, but not the soul of the original. This reveal elevates the story from a simple tale of revenge to a profound exploration of identity and purpose. Ultimately, the moral of this cosmic fable is a simple yet powerful one, a message that resonates from the quietest corners of the human heart to the furthest reaches of the stars. Being human is not about what you are made of, but what you choose to protect. Owen's final, cataclysmic act is not one of destruction, but of sacrifice. He gives up the incredible power he has just discovered, the part of him that makes him a god, in order to save the woman he has come to care for and to preserve the principle of choice. It is the ultimate act of defiance against Cassian's deterministic, genetically engineered vision of the universe. The story's impact, therefore, is intended to be a lingering one. It is a deep space Socratic dialogue, designed to provoke questions rather than provide easy answers. It challenges our assumptions about what it means to be human, to be a monster, to be a hero. By ending on a note of uneasy peace, with the digital ghost of Cassian still lurking in the network and the dormant virus still sleeping in Owen's genes, it suggests that these are not battles that are won once and for all. They are conflicts that must be fought again and again, with every new dawn, on every new world. The quest for humanity is not a destination. It is a journey, a constant, conscious choice, made in the face of the vast, silent, and often terrifying darkness between the stars.